57 and the newly named Media Row.
What are you doing playing Creed?
What are you doing?
Answer
Ham?
me. Oh, for Scott Stapp. Okay, yeah.
They should be the halftime show.
Every year. Just
Just-
bring him in.
Just permanent fixture. We are joined here at the table at Media Row by our friends from Pro Football Focus. We have Steve Palazzolo, and who is 6'10", and I hope I didn't butcher your name.
Nailed
even though
it.
I hear it all the time.
Nailed it.
And old friend and Liverpool friend, Sam Monson. It's Steve and Sam. Everybody knows the PFF podcast, which I've been listening to for years.
Who's not 6'10".
Not 6'10", decidedly not.
Your parents failed you.
Yeah,
You know?
apparently.
It's okay.
You look shiftier, though.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
However, that might not be true on the football field, man.
Look, you definitely got quickness, to your advantage when you're smaller.
I got video proof.
Yes, and how fast did we get the fastball up to?
60. We hit 60.
Okay, that was the goal, right?
Uh-huh.
To get it to 60.
Yep.
That's
Okay.
pretty good.
Right?
Yeah.
It's all right.
Yeah.
Straight from no throwing a baseball experience to 60. Yeah, it's fine. That's what
Yeah.
we were shooting for.
That's why that was the bet. That was the over-under. I
Uh-huh.
didn't think he could do it. He proved me wrong again.
Yeah. It's a great challenge for any dude who, not to in any way suggest, you may not be an athlete in the prime of your life, but the guy who's been retired for a little while, how fast could you throw a baseball? And, of course, try not to wreck your arm in the process. Because I've long said I do need Tommy John. I feel like
You're a
that's-
candidate.
I feel like that's keeping me under 60. Anyway, guys, good to catch up. What's it been, Miami?
Yeah,
It's
well,
been a couple years
for
since-
both of us. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, we're
a
back.
couple years now. Yeah.
The Cowboys are still broken, and I know we should talk Super Bowl, but I'm always interested in you guys talking about this football team because we kind of live in it. We were telling you about the 27-year drought of not just Super Bowls but Final Fours and the dead end they keep running into, and it feels like we're at sort of a dead end again, and they must rebuild. But I would love to hear where you guys kind of saw them finishing this year, like in terms of why did they fail this time? Let's talk that out here for a moment.
Do you want to start? How excited were you though coming out of the Bucs game? I mean, it was like this is the championship team, and
Absolutely.
the offense has never looked that good. And then 1 week later, it's just not there.
Everyone knew.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, everyone knew. Like it's
I thought there was a
didn't buy
chance.
in.
There was cautious optimism. But you go from the Commanders game, worst game that Dak has ever played, to the Bucs game, best game he's ever played, and then he kind of found somewhere in the middle for the Niners game.
But closer to the Washington.
Yeah.
like
for
we've
sure.
been beaten just right in the balls for 30 years as people that live there, fans, all that. And so you just expect that when something good happens, that on the other side, no matter what the data may show, that you're going to get that kick again.
It was such a weird year, though, particularly for the NFC, when you had Philadelphia that's been good, like pillar to post. They were the team that was the number one seed the whole way. San Francisco, from sort of halfway through the year, started to look like that, and then obviously ran out of quarterbacks. But then, Minnesota had this incredible record, was threatening for the number one seed for a while, and at no point did anybody buy it.
No.
The Vikings are not good. This is only ever ending with them getting drop kicked out of the playoffs. I think people thought the same thing about the Giants as well. Dallas was like the one other team from the NFC where you're saying, okay, they're not as good as Philadelphia. They're not as good as San Francisco when they're playing at their best. But if you get a good day from Dallas, they can go toe-to-toe with either of those two teams. And it just didn't happen.
I don't know what to do with that because that's the answer, right? Like good Cowboys is really good, right? That's the 33-point fourth quarter against the Colts where it's like you can't even complete a pass on us,
right?
Because we can rush the passer and we can cover and Dak's good and we can move the ball and all this stuff. But you don't know when you're going to get that.
Yeah, they don't play their best when they need to play their best.
Yeah, there's no analytics for that. Like play better at the right time. I will say though, high level when you look at Dak Prescott and you've called him. How do you parse it, Sam?
I think he's like the most susceptible quarterback in the NFL to changes in his environment. So every quarterback to some extent or other is going to change depending on when you make his receiving core better or worse or his offensive line better or worse. I think Dak Prescott is the most vulnerable quarterback in the NFL to those changes. The second you mess with anything in his supporting setup, his performance will immediately change in a significant way.
Okay, does that not speak to the fact that he's probably, as he approaches 30, this is who he is?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you can tweak things here or there, but you're not going to see some sort of crazy.
Sure. I mean, Dak is never going to become Patrick Mahomes, right?
Yeah.
But nobody else is either. Like this is the problem, I think, is that you only ever have a finite number of these teams that are either amazing or have an amazing quarterback. And everybody else has to figure out ways of getting there time after time after time. And unfortunately, like, part of the thing is, how does a team like Dallas this year go from being a team that could do it if they play their best game to being a team that's there every year? And like, one of the separators between this Dallas team and Philadelphia, for example, is like, you have to hit the process correctly for a multiple year stretch, right? You can't have a kind of Zeke Elliott contract mistake, because that's going to set you back not just this year, but next year and the year after. And those things, like, those are the differences between that margin for error and not. Like, getting a clean run of consistent good process for like 3 or 4 years is what enables Philadelphia to be where they are, because they kind of built in this contingency.
Yeah, and that's the thing about the Eagles that is both so encouraging and both discouraging from a Dallas standpoint, is they can tear it all down and build it right back up that fast, and they seem to lean into aggressiveness that our window, it's not really a window, but we do have an opportunity here with the NFC being down to seize the moment, grab a bunch of one-year guys. We know we're not going to keep them. That's okay. This is the year we're going for it, because we're also set up for the future, because we've played our hand really well on that front. Like, I'm not sure I thought Howie Roseman was a genius 5 years ago. I kind of do now, because
this offseason,
they hit everything.
Genius. It was genius. I mean, I said draft night, I said there's no player I'd rather walk away from in the draft than A.J. Brown, even paying him $25 million a year. If I was the Jags at 1, they got Trayvon Walker. We talk draft all the time. It's like A.J. Brown would make a much bigger impact with the Jaguars than Trayvon Walker for the next 4 years, even with the $25 million. But nobody was like, oh, the Jags should trade number 1 for A.J. Brown. But the Eagles did it for number 18 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the James Bradbury move after the draft, for pennies on the dollar, the Eagles have made a ton of good moves. So,
Gardner Johnson,
and so we love talking draft and free agency and all that stuff, but the Eagles literally got players at every level of the offseason, at every time, always found value. So, I mean, that's part of the answer, is just be really good at team building in all those different ways. And they have the luxury of having Jalen Hurts on the first contract.
But also, we talked about it on our podcast, how sometimes you do need to just get a little bit lucky and not make the screw up that you were going to make. Like, there's that story that Philadelphia was going to trade up to the top of the draft to get Zach Wilson. But as soon as it became clear that Wilson was going to go number 2 to the Jets, they didn't like anybody else. And they were done with the idea of trading up. And that's what, like, that realistically enabled them to do everything else that they've done since, right?
Yeah.
And that happened just because the Jets liked Zach Wilson. Like, that saved them from the mistake that would have undermined all of this.
No doubt.
Like, and sometimes you just need to get lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. And
or admit your mistakes like they did with Wentz.
There you go.
And we just talked about the Cowboys still haven't admitted that the Zeke contract was a mistake.
Right.
No, in fact, they've
leaning into it.
They've verbalized that we want him back.
We need more carries from him. We need 2 yards a pop.
And that's like the full-on panic from the Cowboys' perspective too, is that you're staring at this team that's in the Super Bowl, and they're 4 quarters away from winning their second one in 5 years, and they got the number 10 pick in the draft.
Yeah.
And the number 28 pick in the draft, whatever it is.
It's process, man. Just be good with the process. I think Jalen Hurts was a process pick. I really don't think they were in the room being like, oh, we really got to push Wentz. It was just, this is always draft quarterbacks. Worst case, he's a pretty good backup, and maybe we trade him. But that's a pretty good spot to draft a backup. Best case, oh my gosh, he's our starter on a first contract, and we could go get an A.J. Brown
but it's also,
and actually create a good offense.
Like, technically, they still haven't committed to him
right
in any way, right? They have 2 first-round picks this year. If they wanted to, I'm not saying they're going to. Like, they're going to probably re-sign him to the big money contract, but they could get rid of him the day after the Super Bowl, use their 2 first-round picks to go get the next rookie quarterback. They've built in this like future proofing of the roster and have done for a few years. Whereas every year we seem to roll around to the offseason And Dallas seems like surprised by the contracts that are suddenly due on their own roster. Like, forget free agency and anybody else you can bring in. It's like, oh, wow, these guys are due money? Well, we're not going to pay Amari Cooper. Get rid of him.
Right.
You're like, well, okay, but if you're going to do that, you need to have planned for that eventuality so that you can roll in and backfill and you've future-proofed the idea of things going wrong. Like that, I think, is the fundamental difference between the two teams right now, is that one team has been planning this thing multiple years in advance, and the other one seems continually surprised by the yearly procession of contracts.
What were the vibes here last offseason? Because I feel like there's 2 or 3, most teams are optimistic with their offseason. We drafted well, we got the players we want. And then there's a couple teams, it's like, I think they got worse. And I felt like Dallas was one of those teams last year. They lost legitimate starters and didn't replace them. Was that the feeling here?
Yes. They gave away Amari Cooper. They gave away Lyle Collins.
But then in training camp,
they lose Tyron Smith.
In training camp, we heard from Jerry that the most important ability is availability. That was how they backsold all of these moves that they made.
Signed Frank Gore.
Yeah, exactly.
always available.
Yeah, and honestly, we kind of thought when Tyron went down that they would stink, and then that weird Cooper Rush 4-game winning streak put them back in play. And the NFC seemed wide open, but so much of this crash and burn in January feels like the latest referendum on Dak Prescott, where, like Jalen Hurts, when you have him on a rookie deal, it's great. When you move him up into the top, I believe at the time, the highest paid quarterback in the league, and still remains at least at the bottom of the top 10, because that scale is always moving. But it's like we've kind of come to this conclusion. I know you guys have been very kind to Dak with the data over the years, but it does feel like we're at a point where we have to admit he's the worst good quarterback or the best mid-tier quarterback, or he's somewhere in that, you guys talk about it all the time, that 8 to 12 range, depending on the day. And therefore the Kellen Moore exit actually makes sense to me. I know that's a punchline when you're like, well, now Mike McCarthy, what's he going to figure out? But I felt like they do need to lean into those scheme advantages, and they weren't doing that. And when you have a quarterback like Tua, like Tannehill, like Cousins, like whoever, I think if you're in that range, you've got to really help him. And I don't feel like they have. I feel like we're still seeing 4 curls on key third downs like we were doing with Linehan and Garrett and Romo.
Let me describe, too, like what Sam described earlier about Dak being most dependent on his supporting cast, right? Like our grades back that up. So we've got a very good rookie season, a dip in 2017 and 18. Then they trade for Amari Cooper, who, by the way, also led Derek Carr to a career year, right? Yes. And I know Amari Cooper, they soured on him and got to get rid of him, right? Dak's production goes through the roof with Amari Cooper. Genius move drafting CeeDee Lamb in the first round. We love that, right? I mean, you look historically in the NFL, you cannot have too many wide receivers. It makes sense, all that stuff. And that's when this offense peaked, right? I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm playing fantasy football, but it's the way to win NFL football is to get 3 and 4 playmakers that are tough to cover.
Right.
And having Dalton Schultz as your 4th option, not your 2nd option.
Yes.
Right? It's tactically, it makes sense. This weekend, the Chiefs have to make a decision. What do we do with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert in the run game and Jalen Hurts? They have to make tactical decisions on how to play defense. So that's how you win in today's NFL.
Right.
And if Dak's on $40 million a year, fine, it might limit your ability there. But you can't say, well, he's a $40 million quarterback. He should be able to elevate these guys. Be honest and say, that's the only way we can do this. Because, look, even Tom Brady, they added Antonio Brown to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Gronk. And, Tom Brady's the GOAT, but he's even goatier when he's got better guys. So get as many playmakers as possible.
And I guess that has to be the goal moving forward. Well, gentlemen, love what you guys do. We made up last time. I apologize for perhaps being a foe 10 years ago when I didn't understand what you guys were all about.
An early doubter.
I was an early doubter, but you know what? Over the course of time, I smartened up, understood the process, and I'm a big pro football focused guy. I don't agree with everything, but that's not the point. The point
he only
is
trusts himself.
The point.
Don't let him believe.
Trust your eyes.
You guys do great work. You've changed the game. Oh, real quick, I know we're out of time, but what the heck are you guys doing with soccer now?
Great in soccer.
Changing that game too.
So European soccer, you guys are doing the same thing?
Yeah, pretty much.
All the leagues.
Really?
All of them. Everything we can do.
That's kind of badass.
Trying to take over the world. I like it. Well, listen,
It's Collinsworth, man.
Highly recommend the podcast and the whole operation to the football enthusiasts who are no doubt listening. So Steve and Sam, keep up the great work, guys.
Thank you
sir.
guys.
Boys.
Appreciate it.
Big fans.
Thanks for having us.
All right, Community Quick Hits is coming up next, Dave.
Fentanyl, not the rainbow kind.